The tyrannical Duergar are a dark reflection of their dwarven brothers. Their selfish pursuit for power puts them in conflict with adventurers who find themselves in the Underdark. Despite their evil depictions, there is a history of betrayal, loss, and struggle. In this video, I'll be taking a look at the Duergar Dwarf and discuss how players can use the lore to create a Duergar hero. Hello, welcome to Dungeoneer's Pack, a channel bringing you player-focused discussions and character guides for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. My name is Josh, thank you for watching. Duergar next to the Drow and Deep Gnomes are one of the iconic enemies players will face in the Underdark. The pessimistic and selfish outlook the Grey Dwarves collectively share has allowed them to survive and thrive in the Underdark, building a subterranean kingdom through the use of ancient dwarven knowledge and slavery. Duergar were not always a dominant force in the Underdark. In fact, they did not originate from the subterranean world. Clan Duergar were one of many dwarven clans, but their ambition would set them apart and would lead to their downfall. The dwarven clans speak ill of the Duergar, seeing them as traitors for not respecting Moradin's place in the dwarven pantheon. Instead, the Duergar chose to follow the dwarven god Laudagr. The dwarven clans believe that since Clan Duergar turned their back on Moradin abandoned them and let the Duergar's own ambition consume them, allowing the Grey Dwarves to fall victim to the Mind Flayers. If you ask the Duergar, their accounts also paint a picture of betrayal, but by their dwarven brothers. The Mind Flayers began to corrupt and influence Clan Duergar, preying on their ambition to eventually enslave the clan. Duergar would argue that Moradin and the dwarven clans abandoned them in their time of need, and they had turned to Ludegar as he had offered a path to freedom. Unknown to the Duergar, Ludegar was a ruse. Asmodeus, disguising himself as Ludegar, took his chance to prey on the anger and fear of the Duergar for his own plans, which have yet to come to fruition. Regardless of the accounts, the Duergar's time under the enslavement of the Mind Flayers is the defining influence on the race. Corrupting the Grey Dwarves went beyond subjugation. The Mind Flayers stripped all memory and concept of happiness and pride. Out of survival, the Duergar's tools lost all flair and artistry commonly seen in their fair-skinned counterparts. Instead, a priority was placed on practicality. This, coupled with their selfish ambition, has turned their outlook pessimistic and caused them to pursue power at any cost, even at the expense of their own. During this time of suffering, the Duergar's turn to Ludegar allowed them to develop the ability to wield magic, but this was not the only power they developed. Deep Dura, a Duergar demigod, stole the power of psionics from the Mind Flayers and taught the Duergar how to wield it. The Duergar were able to weaponize the very power that kept them enslaved and rebelled against the Mind Flayers, finding their freedom. The Duergar story is crafted in a way to justify their vileness and have players make no hesitations in taking up arms against them. Their story of finding their freedom and overcoming oppression is diminished by their own turn to commit the same horrible acts imposed on them. So what direction should a player take if they want to play a heroic Duergar? One path to consider and the easiest to pursue would be to play as a Duergar in exile. Despite being perceived as evil, the Duergar are organized, having their own set of cultural morals and laws. Your character could be in exile for taking actions that would be deemed punishable by Duergar law. A player's character would be branded or tattooed so others would know that they have been exiled by their own. The biggest issue I have with this direction, while seen as traditional or classic, keeps the perception of Duergar as villainous, and importantly, your character becomes an exception, not leveraging some of the ties and themes the race has to offer. If your plan is to play your character as the exception, think about what action they committed to be cast out by their people. Determine the weight that decision has on your character. Do they feel lost or have a heavy sense of guilt? Do they feel angry or justified in their actions? Consider having your Duergar hero grapple with the trauma of the past. The history of the Duergar is filled with immense loss and pain. An entire people had the concept of happiness erased from their memory by the Mind Flayers. Think about how that would affect your character's personality. How would they react to seeing others happy? Your character could stumble upon this revelation, venturing off to discover true happiness. You could use this loss of happiness to further fuel your character's hatred of aberrations. They set off on a quest to end the Mind Flayer threat once and for all. Continuing to draw from the Duergar lore, your character could attempt to restore the Duergar's place amongst the other dwarves. They could set off to discover the truth behind their people's downfall. Consider your character's view of other dwarves. Are they filled with rage when speaking about or seeing another dwarf? Uncovering what and who was at the heart of the betrayal could lead to a path of healing and redemption. The Duergar racial mechanics tie them to their dwarven brothers and sisters while giving them an identity of their own. Their ties to other dwarves are reflected in their designation as a subrace of dwarves, which has them sharing a majority of dwarf racial traits. For their iconic ability score increases, a Duergar can add +2 to their constitution for being a dwarf and add +1 to strength, which stems from their subrace. Duergar also share the base walking speed with all dwarves, able to move 25 feet in a round. While all dwarves have dark vision, Duergar have superior dark vision due to living in the Underdark. They are able to see in darkness up to 120 feet. This greater dark vision comes at a cost, as they have sunlight sensitivity like most other Underdark dwelling races. Duergar also retain the resistance to poison benefits from their dwarven lineage, but due to their time as slaves slaves of the Mind Flayers, they develop defenses to illusions and charm-based abilities. They have advantage on saving throws against illusions and against being charmed or paralyzed. Duergar preserve their dwarven cultural ties as they can choose proficiency in smith's tools, brewer's supplies, or mason's tools, and have the dwarven combat training and stone cutting features. Notably missing from their language proficiencies is Undercommon, but Duergar speak Common and Dwarvish. The subrace trait that makes the Duergar distinct is Duergar Magic. The magic abilities granted by the feature could be attributed to their penchant for spellcasting or psionics. The racial mechanics do a great job of nailing various aspects of the lore and make it easy to pair with classes and subclasses that will help players adapt aspects of the lore to create a character that fits the setting. Frontliner options pair well with the racial bonuses provided as well as the aggressive nature the Duergar generally have. Forge Domain clerics and dwarves go hand in hand. A Duergar is no different as the subclass exemplifies their dwarven roots and ability to craft. Instead of following Moradin, a Duergar would be a cleric of Laudagr. The racial bonuses are amazing when paired with the fighter. Being able to resist charm and paralyzation abilities helps the fighter keep swinging. Two subclasses that draw upon the lore of the Duergar are the Rune Knight and Psy Warrior fighter subclasses. While the Rune Knight's features are heavily associated with giants, they do a great job of exemplifying the Duergar's inherent magical abilities as well as their ability to craft. Instead of scribing giant runes, they are adorning their armor with dwarven magic long forgotten. The ability to grow is just an extension of the racial trait that already allows them to increase their size. The Psy Warrior is another great subclass that draws upon the Duergar lore. Instead of pursuing the powers of the arcane, the Duergar could sharpen their mind, developing the very power which held them captive and pairing it with martial might. With Tasha's Origin variant rule, changing our ability score increases opens up the Duergar to other class options without feeling they are penalized. Just like the Psy Knight Fighter, an Aberrant Mind Sorcerer is a perfect subclass to lean into the psionic parts of the lore. A Fiend Patron Warlock would be another option if looking to play into the idea that Asmodeus was masquerading as Laudagr and your Duergar character had been taken over by their own ambitions, thirsting for power. Taking a look at how Duergar are depicted in other official 5th edition settings, you will find that they are underrepresented. In the Magic the Gathering settings of Ravnica, Theros, and Strixhaven, they simply don't exist. In Ravenloft, the Duergar are identical to their traditional fantasy counterparts. They are depicted as greedy, power-hungry dwarves who eventually fell victim to the Mind Flayers. Duergar and Eberron, on the other hand, are a large departure from their usual depictions. The Grey Dwarves instead are a psionic-powered race living on the continent of Sarlona. The Duergar belong to the Archaic civilization, living amongst other dwarves. The Archaic dwarves aided the unity of Rhaedra, the vast empire that governed Sarlona, in developing monoliths to control the citizens. Eventually, the Archaic were betrayed by the unity of Rhaedra and enslaved by the Empire. The Duergar are a tragic-laden option that is right for players to explore the themes of loss, pain, and perseverance. Even though the Duergar are meant to be the evil counterpart to dwarves, the ambiguity of the Duergar's downfall and the conflict that arises from it adds a layer of complexity that isn't often given to the evil-labeled races. It is something that a player and a DM should discuss and collaborate on if a player decides to play a Duergar. Despite the potential the lore has to make the Duergar a fully realized people, they are more often than not written and played as one-dimensional villains, simply committing evil for evil's sake. In my opinion, the very fact that their most villainous act is to subjugate others to the same suffering that was imposed on them by the Mind Flayers cheapens the Duergar story for me. If you decide to play a Duergar, the issue of slavery will come up. Slavery is a heavy topic and may or may not be something that you or others at your table may want to include in your game. Discuss with your playgroup to decide if that is a topic that you're all willing to tackle. The Duergar have a huge potential to be more than the villain in a campaign. By delving into the lore, the conflict between good and evil becomes less certain, giving players the opportunity to create a flawed hero with a depth of emotion and a path forward to redemption. With that said, I want to hear from you. What kind of Duergar hero would you play? Let me know down in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, and if you want to see more content like this, I drop a video every week, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're looking to play as a goblin and need some inspiration, check out my How to Play a Goblin video. You can check it out by clicking the thumbnail on the screen or in the link in the description below. Alright, I'm out of here. Have a good one.